Do you feel like you know a lot of words and can recognize them, but for some reason, when you have to speak English with someone, you tend to use the same old words over and over and over? Or do you feel like you are always trying to learn new words, but in the moment it feels like you learn them, but when it's time to use them in a conversation, blank. You just don't remember them. Many of my students tell me this. One of the things that I hear all the time from my students is, I need to improve my vocabulary. But after spending enough time with them, I realize that they already know many words. The problem here is that most of these words my students already know are living comfortably in what I call the passive vocabulary box inside their brains. So if you want to start remembering more words, you need to start moving some of the words you already know as an intermediate learner from your passive vocabulary box to your active vocabulary box. So in today's episode, I'm going to give you 3 simple steps that will help you start remembering words when you have to produce English via a written text or a spoken conversation. So let's get started. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. How have you been? Hope you've been doing well. Hope you've been having a very nice week so far. And in case you're new here, this podcast is designed to help intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, subscribe to the channel if you are listening on YouTube, or follow the show if you are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That way, you won't miss a single new episode. So let's talk a little bit today about vocabulary. I hinted at this in the introduction of the video today. Active vocabulary versus passive vocabulary. So what is the difference? I like to think that we have 2 boxes in our head. We have 2 boxes in our brains, when it comes to vocabulary. One is the passive vocabulary box, the other is the active vocabulary box. So your passive vocabulary basically contains all the words you already know and recognize. Maybe you don't use those words when you have to produce English. When I say produce, I mean writing in English or speaking in English. When you have to use English for something, those words don't come to you. But if you are reading a text, if you are watching something online and you see that word, you recognize it. You know what it means, or at least you recognize it like, oh, I've seen that word before. I might not remember what it means now, but I've seen it before. Or I know this word, I understand this word, so why can't I use it? Well, it is lying in your passive vocabulary box. Now, your active vocabulary or your active vocabulary box contains all the words you actually use when you produce English. When you speak English, when you write in English, those are the words that you tend to use the most. Let me give you an analogy here. Think of an iceberg. Think of an iceberg. Your active vocabulary is like the tip of the iceberg. It's all the words that are on the surface, let's say, on the surface of your mind, on the surface of your brain. So when you have to use English for some reason, those are the words that are immediately activated because they are right there. They are visible, just like the tip of the iceberg, all right? But what many learners fail to realize is that just like the iceberg is much more than what it seems, right? I mean, if you go deeper, you realize that it's much bigger, much larger than what it seems on the surface. Their vocabulary range is also larger, especially, I'm talking about intermediate and upper intermediate learners here, people who have already been learning English for a few years. So that is probably what's happening to you. If you are already an intermediate or upper intermediate learner of English and have been studying English for years, think of the iceberg. The words that you always use are the tip of the iceberg. But if you dig deep, if you investigate a little bit, you will realize that actually you have a wider range of vocabulary than you think. You know more words than you actually think. All right? So the question is, how can you make a word part of your active vocabulary? Because That's what you have to do. It's not so much about learning new words per se. I've met so many intermediate learners who, spend a lot of effort and energy on learning new words. They create their flashcards and they do all of that stuff. But to me, that is not really the solution. If you are already an intermediate to upper intermediate learner, yes, it's always nice to learn new words, always nice to learn vocabulary, but I think that it's much better for you to focus on activating the passive vocabulary that already lies within you. All right? So to make that possible, you need to start moving these words from your passive vocabulary to your active vocabulary. Let's say, try to bring them to the surface. They are buried deep inside your subconscious, all right? And you have to start bringing some of these words intentionally to the surface. So the next time you have to speak English with someone, these are the words that will be instantly activated for you to use. So without further ado, let me share with you the 3 simple steps you can start implementing today to start bringing some of these words to the surface, making them more active. The steps are exposure, activation, personalization. Exposure, activation, personalization. So I'm going to explain each one of them in detail here. But first, let me share with you an anecdote. I always like to share this story because I remember it so vividly till this day. Most of you know that I love Stephen King, the American author. He writes thrillers, horror stories, and he's a very prolific writer. He's already written, I don't know, maybe more than 50 novels over the entire span of his career. So I love his work. I love the way he writes. And one of my favorite books by Stephen King is The Shining. It's a classic. It was even turned into a famous adaptation by Stanley Kubrick, I believe, with Jack Nicholson in 1980. But I prefer the book, all right? Anyway, I remember when I was reading that book for the first time, I picked up the book in English, and then I started reading it. And then there was this one word that just kept coming up over and over and over and over as I read this book. The word was shriek. Shriek. When I read the word, when I encountered the word for the first time as I was reading the book, I didn't understand the meaning, but I didn't bother to look it up. To me, it was just an unknown word. Like, okay, I don't know this word. Let me keep reading. I can still understand the main story. By the way, this is a tip I can give you, yeah? If you are trying to read in English, don't worry about looking up every single word you don't understand in the text. Provided that you can understand the main idea of the page of the story, just keep reading, all right? So that's what I did. I encountered this word, shriek. I had no idea what that meant, but I kept reading anyway. But then I realized that that word started to be repeated across the entire story. This character shrieked. There was a shriek. Shriek here, shriek there, So it got to a point where I was seeing that word so many times throughout my reading that at some point I had to stop, put the book down, and actually look up the meaning in the dictionary. And then I learned that shriek means a high-pitched scream. When a person screams, usually in horror or in fear, all right, it's the high-pitched scream. And then I was like, oh, that's cool. I learned this new word. And then after I learned the meaning, I kept reading the story. And then again, the word kept coming up all the time. But now I knew the meaning, so it made perfect sense. By the time I finished reading the book has, I don't know, around 400 pages or something, or more. After I finished the entire story, I had already seen that word so many times, and I had taken time to look up the meaning that I never forgot it. I never forgot it. So this is an example of exposure and activation in place. More exposure. So let me, start introducing here the first step, which is exposure. In order for you to activate vocabulary and for you to start remembering words in English, you need tons of exposure to the language. Obviously, I talk about this all the time here on the podcast. You need to be consuming English regularly. In my opinion, ideally every day. You want to make English part of your daily routine, part of your life. So, what do I mean by consuming English? Well, being in touch with English media. Reading books, like I was just describing, is a great option. It's a great way for you to do that. Having the habit of reading a little bit of a book in English every single day. This is excellent for your vocabulary building. But also listening to podcasts, watching videos on YouTube, watching TED Talks, watching movies, TV series, interviews in English, watching the news in English. You see, it's that constant exposure. This is a given. This is step one, like the basic step, all right? You know, it's kind of ironic, yeah? I mean, a learner who says that he or she needs to improve their vocabulary, but they don't consume English in their daily routine. I mean, they only think about English when they have maybe a class with their teacher or an English class at their school. This is ironic, and it's contradictory. It doesn't make any sense, all right? So make sure you are gaining exposure to English daily. Why? Why is that important? You need to see the word multiple times across a period of time. That's what happened to me with The Shining, you know. Without knowing, without realizing, I was employing the spaced repetition system in learning the word shriek without realizing it, because, you know, I didn't know about spaced repetition back then, because, you know, that's what it is about, right? It's about reviewing the word or the expressions you are trying to incorporate multiple times over a period of time and in spaces. You know, you see the word today, maybe by the end of the week you see it again, and then next week you see it again, and then 2 weeks from now you see it again. You know, that, like, you know, reviewing the word in spaced intervals. All right, so you need to see a word multiple times before it becomes part of your passive vocabulary first, and then hopefully your active vocabulary later. And I would say that the words are different. You know, it's hard to explain that, but I find that some words are easier to memorize, easier to incorporate, meaning that some words don't require you to review them multiple times. For some reason, maybe you see the word a couple of times and you already remember it, and it's part of your vocabulary right away. Other words are more complex or harder, so you need more exposure, like shriek in my case, all right? But regardless, you need regular exposure. And it's important also, still talking about exposure, that you are laser focused. I love this collocation. You are laser focused, all right? What do I mean by this? You should be focusing on words that catch your attention, all right? Like I was just saying, if you are reading a book in English and you encounter 5 or 10 words there on the page that you don't know, for sure, 1 or 2 words there will catch your attention the most. Those are the ones you want to focus on. You see? Those are the ones you need to spend more time on, look up the meaning, take notes, all right? Forget about the rest. This is you being laser focused. If you try to look up the meaning of every word you don't know, you're going to go crazy, all right? Also, make sure you ask this question. You know, when you encounter a word in a piece of media that you don't know and that catches your attention, all right, and then you take notes, maybe you look it up in the dictionary, you learn the meaning, ask yourself, where else can I see this word being used? Okay, I just found this word in this book that I'm reading, or I just found this word in this video that I'm watching. I like the word. I just learned the meaning. Great. I need more exposure to this word. So where else can I see this word being used? You see, how can I gain more exposure to this word? Because, you know, I don't want to just learn this word now and then forget about it next week. So how can I review this word again and again? You can use some tools for this, some online tools. For example, the website Youglish is really useful for that. Youglish, I believe it's youglish.com. So just search on Google later, Youglish. Youglish.com, I believe. It's a really useful website. You just go in there, you type in the search bar the word that you just learned, and then you will see a bunch of YouTube videos using that word in various contexts. So that is a great tool that you can use to review that word multiple times, being used by different speakers talking about different topics. All right, this is one tool that you can use. Also, obviously, you can do a simple Google search. Just be specific. For example, imagine you love music, right? You can search on Google songs that have the word X and start looking for it. Or movies that have the word X, or movie scenes that have the word X. All right? So start looking by doing a simple Google search. Obviously, you can use AI for this nowadays. Yeah? You can use ChatGPT, Gemini, and other models to maybe give you more examples with that word. You can ask for 100 examples of that word, 200 example sentences using that word. And then you can maybe review one sentence with that word every day. Imagine, there is a word that you just learned and you really like it. You want to make it part of your vocabulary. So go to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to generate 30 example sentences with that word you just learned. And then you just read or review one sentence per day for 30 days. All right? Chances are by the end of the first month, that word will at least be part of your passive vocabulary already because you will have seen it every single day of the month. You see what I mean? By exposure. All right? You need to be revisiting the word over and over and over again. All right? I mentioned spaced repetition. There are useful apps for this as well, apps that present you with the words you are trying to memorize at spaced intervals. You can also use those, but if you want to be more old school like I was, when I was learning, just do this, just create or come up with sentences with the word and then just review those sentences for 1 month, for 2 months, until you feel like you have memorized it. So that's the first step, exposure, all right? If you don't have enough exposure to English, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to improve vocabulary. But what about step 2, activation? What is activation about? I like to think of activation as actively, intentionally, deliberately, proactively making a point of using the word the next opportunity you have. It's not just about revisiting the word or seeing the word, but it's also about activating that word by actually using it the next chance you have. For example, I just shared with you my story reading The Shining and how I learned the word shriek, right? Remember that I had tons of exposure to that word throughout my reading of the book. That was a ton of exposure, right? But what did I do today? I used the word on my podcast. I just used the word that I learned years ago. In other words, I just activated that word again in my brain. You see, there was an opportunity, there was a chance for me to use that word. I used it. You see, this is activation. Proactively using the word you are studying, all right? It's funny because I think it was last week, I was teaching this class of adult students, and they were kind of, sharing that issue, that struggle, of needing to learn more vocabulary, needing to remember the words and improve words, And then I asked them a very simple question. I said, look, guys, in today's class, you learned 5 new expressions, 5 new words. Very nice, right? Yeah, very nice, they said. But then I said, what is the chance that by next week you will have forgotten all these words already? And then they stopped, they thought a little bit, and then they said, yeah, probably I will have forgotten these words that we learned today in class by next week. And then I went on to explain to them what I'm explaining to you now. Why does that happen? Obviously, because, if you don't take time to proactively, intentionally activate those words or use those words, by next week, you will have forgotten them. By next month, you will have forgotten them. So activation is about being intentional, all right? Using the word any chance you get. So if you are a person who has formal classes, maybe you go to a language school to study English there twice a week, or maybe you have classes with a private teacher, or maybe you are part of a conversation club in English, or you are part of a private community that is regularly meeting to practice conversation, like my private community, for example. My members, my students there in the community, they meet twice a week, to get together and discuss a topic that I assign. Yeah? Not to mention the monthly live Q&A they have with me live for about 1 hour and a half for us to talk some more and hang out on Zoom. You see, these are all opportunities for you to activate the words you are trying to learn and to memorize. So classes and live sessions like that provide you with the opportunity to use the word with intention, intentionally. Now, if you are studying by yourself, one way, like I said, is coming up with example sentences using the word. Don't just stop at looking up the meaning of the word in the dictionary. How can you activate that if you're studying by yourself? Start writing down some sentences, using that word. How do you do that? Well, aside from writing down sentences, you can maybe write a piece of text. It could be an article, an essay, a diary entry even, and you are intentionally trying to use that word, all right? And like I just shared a little earlier, you can ask ChatGPT to come up with a script for a dialogue using the word multiple times, So these are all ways of trying to use the word that you are trying to learn, okay? So if you have the privilege of joining classes, joining live sessions, because, not everybody has that opportunity, you should be mindful about this. You should be intentional. Like, okay, I just learned the word shriek with Thiago on this podcast, for example. I'm going to make sure that the next class I have with my peers, with my teacher, the next conversation club session I join, the next live meetup I join to practice my English, I'm going to make sure that I use that word shriek at least once during the conversation. I will be actively listening to the conversation and actively looking for an opportunity to use that word whenever the opportunity presents itself. You see, it's that deliberate, intentional mind work you have to go through. To me, this is how you improve vocabulary for real. This is how you bring words from your passive vocabulary into your active vocabulary. You got to be intentional about this, all right? What about the third step? Personalization. Personalization, all right? Well, I believe that you learn words better if they mean something to you personally, all right? And usually the words that are part of our active vocabulary tend to be words that we have more affinity with for some reason. Maybe we like the way they sound. We like the meaning they carry. For some reason, we like those words better, so they tend to be part of our active vocabulary, all right? So, like I said, focus on words that catch your attention. Maybe the word shriek that you learned with me today didn't catch your attention for some reason. Maybe it was a word for you that was like, okay, I didn't know this word. It's nice that I learned this word with Thiago today, but, I don't see myself using that word. I prefer to just say scream or yell or shout, and I'm good with that. That's fine. No problem at all. You see? Maybe that word didn't click with you, but I'm sure that there are other words in English that click with you. You want to focus on those words, all right? Ask yourself this question: how can I use this word in my daily routine? How can I use this word more often at work, if you use English for work, in my English classes, with my teacher every week? All right, how can I use this word more often? In what situations could I use this word? This is also about making it personal. I talk about that all the time. Imagine situations that could potentially happen in your life, that are likely to happen in your life, actually, and use that word. That would allow you to use that word. Imagine you have the habit of going to the gym every Saturday morning. This is already something that you do every week that is personal to you, all right? Now, imagine a situation that maybe could happen at the gym on a Saturday morning that would allow you to use the word shriek, for example, that we are talking about over and over today, right? Imagine you go to the gym on Saturday morning to work out, and then you are there, minding your own business, going through your program, and then you hear a loud noise, like, bang, and then you hear a shriek. Oh man, what happened? Maybe somebody had an accident there with one of the machines, with one of the gym machines. You see? So this is you bringing the word to something close to you, to something personal that could potentially happen in your life. I mean, you see, you are imagining a real scenario that is already true in your life and a hypothetical scenario that could happen that would allow you to use the word. You see, it's this mental process that you need to start developing more within yourself to start activating all these words that are probably lying dormant inside you right now. You know what I mean? I know some learners who love to also associate the meaning of certain words with personal things. Yeah, I don't think I do that specifically myself, but for example, some people like to picture an image in their minds that is meaningful to them, that is personal, that is funny, and they associate that image with the word. And that association helps them remember the word better. No problem at all. This is a great way, actually, for you to personalize the vocabulary for you. All right. I've never felt the need to do that personally. To me, it was just a matter of tons of exposure and tons of activation, like, reviewing the words, seeing the words multiple times and using them as much as I could. But these associations can be very helpful. Maybe you can think of an image, create that association with the word. That's why some people find flashcards, for example, useful, because flashcards allow you to do that. Yeah? They allow you to associate the word with an image. So if that is useful to you, make sure you use that. All right? Flashcards, for example. So the point is, you want to make the vocabulary you are trying to use more personal to you. All right? Also remember that it is possible to build up your vocabulary only with passive exposure, although I don't recommend it. Why? Because if you rely only on passive exposure to build up your vocabulary in English, you're going to need tons of hours of exposure to have a working vocabulary. And also, I think that this approach works better if you have the habit of consuming a lot of English every single day. You have been doing that for years, and you started doing that relatively young. Like, younger generations now, of young adults and teenagers, they were kind of born already into technology. So they have been consuming English content, for example, for years, since they were children. I see those young people building up their vocabulary organically just by doing that. But if you are already older and you are studying English, but you are starting now to consume English media, or it's just been a few years, like maybe 2-3 years that you have been doing that, I also suggest being more proactive if you want to speed up the process of learning words and actually using them. All right? Because by being proactive and using the words you're trying to incorporate into your vocabulary with intention, you will have better chances, I believe, to make those words part of your active vocabulary. And here's the thing. Maybe you're going to have to use that word intentionally, not just once, but multiple times. Maybe you spend a month, 2 months, 3 months using that word every week, and then it will have become part of your active vocabulary. You see? Also, work with quality, not quantity. That reminds me of some YouTube videos I have come across here on YouTube that are titled, Learn 100 words in 15 minutes, 1,000 words in 10 minutes. Guys, come on. Don't fall for these clickbaity titles, Really, you're going to learn 100 words in 15 minutes? No. Sorry, you're not going to learn 100 words in 15 minutes, all right? You might be exposed to those 100 words, some of them for the first time when you watch that video. But if you don't review those words multiple times after, and if you don't bother to use those words, you won't have learned 100 words in 15 minutes. Come on, all right? So focus on quality, not quantity. Focus on one word, 2, 3 words that catch your attention and spend enough time with those words. If by the end of 1, 2, 3 months, you have incorporated those 2, 3 words actively into your vocabulary, that's a great victory already, all right? Now you're using 3 different words. Let's move on to the next batch, the next group, all right? So in the spirit of working with quality over quantity, and also because I want to give you something practical to do after listening to this episode, check it out. I'm going to teach you now 3 different expressions, just 3, you see? Focusing on quality, not quantity. 3 expressions, all right? And I want you to pick just one, you see? I'm going to teach you just 3 expressions now, and I want you to pick one, all right? To stay with you, for you to work with for the next week, 2 weeks, a month, you choose, all right? So these are all expressions that you can use in the context of work, for example. Here's the first one. To be made redundant. To be made redundant. Notice that you have to conjugate the be verb here. So I was made redundant. She will be made redundant. They were made redundant. Okay, you have to conjugate the verb to be. What does it mean? When a person is made redundant at work, usually there is some sort of restructuring of the business, and the company doesn't need that person's work or position anymore. Maybe the person's department is going to be closed, or the company is experiencing some financial struggles, so the company can't afford to keep that employee in that position, in that department. So the person is made redundant. The employee is made redundant. This means that the company fires the employee, all right? Lets the person go, not because the person is a bad worker or a bad professional, but because of external circumstances, other circumstances that are not specifically about the person, about the professional. Like I said, restructuring of the company, crisis, financial struggle that the company is experiencing, all right? Or the department ceases to exist, so the person is made redundant, all right? So that's the first expression. Here's an example sentence. You see, I just gave you the expression. I gave you the meaning, all right? This is you being exposed to the expression for the first time if you have never heard it before. Now let's activate a little bit this expression here by coming up with a sentence. As an example, listen. After 15 years with the company, Sarah was unfortunately made redundant when her department was outsourced. You see? That's it. This is one expression. The second expression, to have the bandwidth to do something. To have the bandwidth to do something. In the context of work, if you say to a colleague, for example, that you don't have the bandwidth to do something, it means that you don't have the resources, the time, the mental energy to work on that project because you are already so busy with all these other tasks and projects here. So you can't even contemplate the idea of adding yet another project into your busy schedule, all right? So your colleague comes to you and says, hey, can you help me with this project? You can say, look, I'm sorry, but, I'm really busy here. I don't have the bandwidth to work on that right now. You see? I don't have the time, the energy, the resources to dedicate for that right now. All right? That was exposure. I just exposed you to that expression. Let's activate that a little bit with a sentence. Listen, I love to help with a new initiative, but with these 2 major projects, I just don't have the bandwidth to take on anything else right now. Finally, the third expression, to be swamped. In the context of work, all right? To be swamped. Remember, you can conjugate the verb to be. If you say to a person at work that you are swamped, it means that you are buried in work. You are drowning in work. You have so much work to do, so many tasks to get done that it feels like you are drowning in work. You are burying yourself in work. So you are extremely busy, all right? Here's an example. Let's activate that. I can't make it to the team lunch today. I'm completely swamped with client deadlines. You see? Instead of I'm completely busy, you can say I'm completely swamped with client deadlines. You can also be a little bit creative here, yeah, because to have the bandwidth to do something and to be swamped could be used together, right? Going back to that example, your colleague, your coworker comes to you and asks you for help. Hey, could you help me with this project here? And then you could say, oh, sorry, not right now. I'm swamped with client deadlines here, so I don't have the bandwidth to do that right now. You see? So depending on the expression or the word, you can use them together in the same situation. All right? So that's it. These are 3 expressions that I'm just teaching you now that you can use in the context of work. Now, I want you to pick one of them, one that is completely new to you or one that caught your attention the most. I'm sure that out of these 3, you liked one better than the others. So pick that one. Focus on that one, all right? Now that you have picked one of these, I want you to think of, first of all, ways to gain more exposure to that expression. Think to yourself, ask yourself, how can I gain more exposure? How can I review this expression multiple times in the next weeks, in the next month? I'm sure you will come up with ways to review that expression. All right? Second point, think of ways to activate that expression. Ask yourself, how can I activate this expression? How can I deliberately use it? And then you start thinking of opportunities, right, to speak English or to use English. I have to write emails at work every day. So maybe in the next email I'm going to use this expression somehow. Or, I have private classes with my English teacher online every Monday. So next Monday, I'm going to use that expression during our conversation. Oh, I have a meetup session with my community peers next week. I'm going to use that expression during the conversation somehow. Or, you know what? I'm going to create here 10 example sentences or 30 example sentences with that expression, and I'm going to review one sentence per day over the next 10, 15, or 30 days. You see? So think of ways to activate the vocabulary over the next weeks and months. Finally, make it personal. All right? How can you bring that expression that you picked, how can you bring that expression closer to you, to your reality, to your life, to your interests? How can you make it personal to you? Do you have to associate that expression with maybe an event at work or with a crazy image that, you like or that you find funny or interesting? How can you make it personal to you? What situations could potentially happen in your life, maybe at work, because these are all related to work, that would allow you to use that expression? I guarantee if you go through that mental process and follow these 3 steps, exposure, activation, and personalization, with every new word or new expression you encounter, it's going to be much easier and faster for you to start building up your vocabulary range and moving more words into your active vocabulary. It's going to be much easier for you to start remembering these words because, to me, this is a very proactive approach to vocabulary learning and vocabulary building. All right? Now, before we wrap up today's episode, it's time for the Learner's Corner. And for the Learner's Corner today, I have here a voice message from a viewer from Hungary, I believe. His name is Tamás. So let's listen to Tamás.
Hi, I am Tamás from Hungary. I am 36-year-old. I started to learn English intensively a few months ago because I want to apply a job abroad, and to be honest, I learned English for many years, but I never tried to speak. And this is the first time when I tried to speak in English to someone else. When I speaking, I always mixing the grammars, and unfortunately I forget a lot of words, but now I try to improve my vocabulary, and I'm focusing mainly the grammar rules. So this is my English skill now. Maybe can you suggest me some information? How can I continue?
All right, I think the message got cut out there at the end, but thank you for sharing your message with me here with the podcast, Tamas. And if I understood correctly, was that the first time you spoke publicly in English here, sending me this message? If that was the case, good job, great job for taking that first step. And, it's great to, receive messages from people from all over the world. I mean, Hungary, look at that. I mean, I would never expect to receive a message from a person in Hungary, so it's amazing to see that. Look, I think that your English is pretty good as it is right now. I mean, I can see that you can communicate. I think that you have clear pronunciation, which is great. It's not difficult to understand what you're saying. Now, in the spirit of focusing on quality, not quantity, let me just recommend one topic for you to focus on right now. All right. And it's good because, you are kind of focusing on grammar rules and studying grammar, right? So let me give you one topic that I think will benefit you for you to focus on for the next months. All right. Articles. Focus on learning about articles in English. We have 3 articles in English, right? We have the indefinite articles, and an, and the. Because as I was listening to you, I noticed that you didn't use some articles like and, the properly, or sometimes you didn't use them at all when you should have used them, So focus on that. Focus on studying articles and using articles when you speak. That's what I would say for now. But thank you so much for taking the time to send me this message, and I really appreciate that. All right. Those of you who want to do it just like Tamas, write me an email at hello.teacherthiago@gmail.com. Share your story, share a question, share whatever you want that is related to English learning, of course, to be featured here on the podcast. All right. Don't forget to check out my paid resources. For example, my private community. I mentioned the private community in the episode today. It's an amazing resource because it connects you with learners from all over the world. They get together every week to practice conversation. Everything happens under my guidance. And as a member, you get access to other cool stuff. So consider becoming a member of my private community. If you want to significantly improve your pronunciation and listening skills in English, check out my pronunciation course. That can help you a lot as well. And of course, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, like this video, leave me a comment, letting me know what you thought about today's topic, letting me know how you have been practicing and improving, trying to improve your vocabulary, and share this video with a friend who's also learning English. All right? If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave me a 5-star review on those platforms. That helps me a lot over there as well. And again, follow the show so you don't miss a single new episode. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today, for listening to me. I'm Thiago. I'm signing off. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll be talking to you very soon in the upcoming episode. Bye-bye.